This is a story about how the noon stage screamed in, a veiled bride took my name in a rush, and gunfire split the vows her groom hauled off breathing, while my hands came away red from her veil, by the time the bell quit. The wind was already thinning their tracks. Larkspur Junction, Dakota, 1879, a place the map forgot until the noon whistle made it remember two sidings, a coughing water tank and a clabbered depot with its bell hung crooked as a tooth. Folks called it a town because calling it a way station hurt their pride. I called it home because I didn't have another. Under my cot, in a drawer that sticks on damp days, lies a deputy star bent along one arm where a bullet kissed it and missed me. I stopped wearing it after a winter night when I waited for Sheriff Munn to ride from 5 miles out, and a boy bled in a wagon while I stood with my hands full of nothing. Since then I've learned the sound the wind makes when it runs out of. Mercy. Law here runs on habit, and whatever paper Amos Nettles can stamp. He's our justice of the peace, renting a desk between the telegraph and the pot-bellied stove, a cracked Bible riding herd over oaths. The platform groans under molasses barrels and barbed wire bales. Flies drift like ash above a crate still. Stenciled black powder empty now, though the label makes Whit McKenna, who throws sacks for the line, step soft around it. Clary Finch, lean as a quirt and twice as loud, keeps the switch lamp bright and the bell rope coiled. Men talk lower. Lately, a bank courier out of Bismarck vanished on the North Road, with papers said to settle water rights, and the ridge ranchers and flatland sodbusters glare at each other like two ends of the same fuse. The spring-called cat's eye is blinking dry. Early and thirst writes mean promises in a man. I'm not deputy anymore. Munn rode north after rail cutters, and the pay for standing watch falls to whoever wants it least. Most men want it least. Pike's riders know the Badlands seams better than any map and take their pay in cattle, salt, or fear, which spends dearer than coin and buys longer memory. What makes me the one to ride is simple as blame. I can read this country like a ledger, and I owe a debt books don't close. 3 weeks back I opened a letter addressed not to law, but to me. You don't know me, it said, but you knew my brother, and he died because help came late. She meant the wagon boy. The letter carried a name, Miss Vale, and a request that I meet the noon stage. See her safely to a wedding meant quiet claims before men with rifles could argue them. I wired Nettles to be ready. If the vows were hurried, I helped hurry. Then, that's a kind of promise you can't wash off. The stage screamed in on time and too fast. Nettles read the words with his seal already lifted. The couple said yes as if breath burned to say it. Then the gun cracks came like nails into green wood. The groom went down and then rose again in other hands, hauled off breathing while the bell still shivered from saying I do. I steadied the bride felt willow-thin bones, and my palms came away red from her veil. Folks spilled, gawking first and arguing second. Organize a posse. Draft notices, send a wire north. Wait on Munn, wait on the heat to break. Wait on fear to pass. I went to my room, opened the drawer, and slid the bent star under my shirt where its edge would bite and remind me what I am when there's no one else to be it. Retention. Hook gives I'd already watched one person die because I waited. I wasn't about to make it two. I saddled Gray Molly while depot men argued themselves brave and tied their courage to chairs. The bride Mrs. Vale now, a name that fit like a borrowed coat, stood in Nettles's doorway, wanting certainties I didn't have. Shadows tell. The truth, I said. I ride now. Nettles shoved me a canteen and a tin of cartridges. Clary stuffed jerky into my saddlebag. Whit passed a coil of rawhide cut off his balkiest mule last spring. I took my Winchester, my Colt, and the bent, star under my shirt bit when I breathed. Beyond the platform the bell rope still swayed, as if it remembered the vows we'd just broken. Noon light made everything honest and mean. The stage yard was a churn of hooves and haste. Panic leaves prints. I walked the circle twice until sign, separated from noise. Fresh hoof cuts angling southwest, away from the tank, and into country that drinks men. 4 mounts heavy with riders. One dragging a hair on the near fore fresh shoe, clinches bright. In those ruts a pair of narrow-heeled, boots stuttered, toes catching, then falling into that short, miserable gait of a man led by the wrists. A blue scrap snagged on greasewood, cravat silk, city weave, torn on the bias. 30 paces on, 3 brass mouths stared at the sun Winchester hulls, stampings sharp. Higher on the bank, 2 short revolver empties. Somebody thundered a warning, while somebody else did the lifting. In the dirt below, drops the color of cherries dotted a line and quit. Not enough to kill. Rope fibers lay in the dust like gray hair. The country opens to teeth a mile out chalk buttes. Dry washes scribbled into the earth with a dull knife. There the lead horse showed me his bad habit. A half-moon nick on the near fore, regular as a coin bite. A decent smith would have tossed that shoe. A lazy one nailed it. Marten Pike liked lazy smiths. He ran mounts hard and changed them where no one kept books. I tasted grit and older debt. Why keep a man breathing? For coin, maybe, but water spends longer. Folks had been whispering about a deed map gone missing, a spring worth more than half a herd. If Pike believed the Groom carried location and witness both in his coat and in his bride, he'd keep lungs working until ink changed hands or leverage did. That bought me hours. Maybe the trail slid into a draw where heat pooled and the wailed stank of iron and sage. There the sign tightened. A knee mark at the cinch check, a thumb print in sweat along the latigo, a chaw spit the ants hadn't found yet. I lifted a tuft of rope fuzz and set it back. The wind went right to left. Steady, so I stayed in the wash's shade where sign held, and every stone cast longer truth than at high sun. A crow complained 3 short times from far off. One more piece would shift direction from guessing to knowing. I found it where the draw spilled into a shallow wash, lined with willow ghosts. A mark pressed into damp sand, the heel edge cut. True, the crossbar crisp. Some men write letters. Pike makes a cross with his boot when he wants a man to understand who he's following, and that turning back won't save him. The wash shouldered into stone and found a seep, a patient bruise where water worried itself free 1 bead at a time. I smelled iron first, then wool. The stage guard lay propped under a rock lip, his scarf blood dark. He'd crawled from the Tsar, ambushed the way stubborn men do, farther than pain expected. His eyes tracked my boots. "You on, he asked. I said I was. He smiled like a man hearing a joke for the last time. "Good. Big one's Pike, Marten Pike." He pushed something flat into my palm. "Took it when we righted the coach," he said. From the gent's inside pocket, figured it was nothing. Figured wrong. The paper was sweat-soft and folded twice, edges trembling in the wash's small draft. Bismarck Land Office at the top, all throat-clearing. Then the meat. Mr. Elijah Hart, certified surveyor, bearer of the enclosed deed map and sworn statement. Locating a perennial spring within Section 12, Township 139 North, Range 81 West. Witness required upon filing at the county seat. Why keep him breathing? Because ink without a mouth is only paper. A bride gives a name. A witness gives a river. I saw Mrs. Vale again in Nettles's doorway, chin set like a girl bracing for a lash. She hadn't exactly lied. She'd left rooms unlit. An arranged match puts a stranger in the family column and drags a claim out of rumor into record if the right hands sign at the right desk. It also paints a target big enough to see from the ridge. If Hart was the surveyor who could fix Cat's eye on a map and make the rancher's feud into a verdict, Pike would keep him able to talk until the map and the oath both belonged to him. The guard's fingers twitched at my sleeve. "Cathedral," he breathed. "They'll cut for Cathedral Gulch. Wind wipes sign there. Rock keeps heat like a stove. Pike likes the echo." He grinned and hated that it hurt. I wet his scarf in the seat and held it to his mouth. It came. A way darker, heavy as a promise. "Tell the lady I tried," he said. He pulled me close with what strength he had left, breath hot and thin, and his eyes went hard with the kind of truth that doesn't ask permission. I folded his hands and set the letter on his chest, because a man ought to leave holding proof the world keeps records. Then I took it back because the world doesn't. I tucked it near my heart where the bent star already lived, cinched Molly one hole tighter, and looked west. The trail climbed for bad ground and long shadows, angling toward the gulch that turns. Pursuit into graves if you let the sun get ahead. I said it out loud so I'd believe it. I'd have heart cut loose before. Pike reached stone that talks back. Retention hook gives the guard dragged me close and rasped, "Your groom ain't who," he says. "Neither is your bride." Then he went still. Cathedral Gulch isn't a church. It's a stone throat that swallows sound and gives it back different, the way a guilty man repeats himself. I came in high along the rim where cold blue moonlight etched every tooth of the buttes, and left the bottoms black as a banker's ledger. Pike's camp nested in the bend 4 horses ground tied, one with that half-moon neck on the near fore, a low cook fire, 2 bedrolls, 2 shadows walking. I counted by glint and habit, a Henry laid across, a saddle tree, 2 Winchesters leaned in shadow, a cut-down Colt on the cook's hip, 4 rifles, 3 pistols, Hart's shape against the wagon tongue, head bowed. I tied Molly to a pinion nub and slid down on my belly, chalk dust painting my shirt. The air was colder near the sand, every ember a red coin. I palmed the veil. Pin Mrs. Vale had pressed into my hand and mouthed a prayer to any god that still minded rope. Hart's wrists were crossed and tied in front, his ankles wrapped sloppy. He breathed like a man measuring a lie. I lay behind him close enough to smell canned peaches on his breath. "Quiet," he whispered, without moving his mouth. I worried. The knot with the pin until the hemp side open. His hand slid free an inch, then rested on the rope again, like a bird testing daylight. I cut the ankle wrap until one twist remained, and touched his boot. He nodded. The warning was not a shout, but a thickening of dark. A muzzle burped, and the shot shaved my brim's front, sending it skating into the coals. For a breath the hat floated like it was relieved to leave me. Then it settled, brim smoking at the fire's edge. The camp stilled into that mean, quiet men make right after they guess wrong and like it. "Evenin', lawman," a voice drawled, honey over iron. Marten Pike stepped into the ember glow with a grin that lived on your skin after you saw it. Smooth hat, new boots, a vest that once belonged to a man who could afford shine. His Henry hung easy as a habit. He didn't swing it. He smiled instead, which in Pike's book is worse. Hart could have bolted. He didn't. He tucked his freed, hands under and slumped so the rope still reed true from where the watchers stood. "What can you trade me, deputy?" Pike asked, pasting the old title like a joke only we two knew. You read sign fine. Read this, you got a bride up yonder, and a paper under your shirt that don't know your name. Bring me the girl and the paper that makes water into money, and I'll swap you this man breathing. Or come back at dawn with a shovel and a story for the lady. I measured the ground between us, and found there wasn't any I could buy with. Courage, leverage didn't live in that gulch. It lived in town in Nettles's desk, in the bell rope folks jump when it rings, in which side of the street the ranch men and sod men choose when ink turns law. Pike owned the night. I needed him to believe I owned tomorrow. Dawn, I said, at the mouth. I backed up the sand slope slow enough to keep pride from pulling a trigger and climbed to Molly without turning my back. I rode back bareheaded, moon on the buttes, the bent star biting my chest. In Nettles's office the stove ticked. The bride waited veiled. How bad? Breathing, I said. For a price. I set the land office letter down. Nettles read, and went pale. Section 12, he said. Cat's eye. She lifted the veil. Ada Vale, she said. I took Hart's name so I could swear when men tried to shut the book. Clerk won't take a stranger on a contested claim. A spouse is kin. I chose standing over romance. Cat's eye isn't a puddle, she said. It's a seam under basalt. The map shows where to sink and where to leave the shovel alone. Put that to record, and the feud ends in ink. Some men don't want that. Pike rides for himself, but money holds the reins. A syndicate buys range with papers the railroad pretends not to see. Their clerk files when it favors them. Hart's map ruins that. The church bell shifted once, a dull note. Nettles flattened the township plat, tracing the dry creek. Cathedral Gulch, he said. I nodded. He wants you and the deed at dawn, I said. He thinks breath is leverage forever. Is it? Ada asked. For a night, I said. By noon it trades worse than fear. We won't outshoot. Pike an open rock. We outnumber him with truth. His riders are small prides twisted to rope. Show he kept them thirsty for useless paper, and it unlays. She unhooked a pen, let the veil fall, set it on the map. Longer than hair needs, thinned to an edge spring steel, straightened from a corset stay. I sent you that letter, she said. My brother was the boy who bled in the wagon, while folks waited for a badge. I learned to bring my own tools. I used its twin tonight, I said, laying the other beside it. Side by side they made a cross only we'd read. Hart's wrists are half loose. When the moment turns, he'll finish the cut. Before that, we make Pike read the wrong paper. I looked to Nettles. Can you copy the deed close enough to fool a greedy man at high sun? Nettles opened a drawer of stamps, wax, spectacles. I can draw the lines and seal it, he said. Under a judge it dies, under a gun it lives long enough. That's all we need, I said. We show Pike what he wants to see, and make sure his men see it, too. When lie sits under his thumb and truth runs past his stirrup, he'll look small. Small don't lead long. Ada studied the plat. You'll need riders where the arroyo mouths the gulch, she said. Clary can call with the bell. The liveryman can run remounts. At dawn I take the decoy and Ada to the mouth. Said, we let Pike smell victory. While he reads, Hart cuts. When he grabs, the arroyo speaks. Ada slid the pin into a seam inside her sleeve. I'll ride, she said. He took a husband I barely knew, but he took my word too. He'll believe me before he believes you. The bell droned once. I pressed the bent star flat. Let's end this with ink, if we can, she said. If not, I said. We spend only what must be spent. We work the hours most men waste on sleep. Nettles set spectacles on his nose, trimmed his pen to a surgical bite, and copied the deed map line for line. I told him where a greedy eye lands first on the seal, so he warmed wax at the stove, pressed his stamp true, then thumbed it while it cooled to blur the edge the way travel does. We folded the paper twice, rubbed it with a little stove ash and sweat from my neck, and slid it into oiled cloth that had carried cartridges long enough to smell right. On the back we ghosted a clerk's docket mark to sell the lie in a hurry. The true map went into Nettles's Bible under Judges. F. Jenks, the liveryman, answered my knock bare-armed and hard-eyed. He owed me a favor from a winter I dug his mare out of a drift. Whit McKenna rolled from his bunk in the hay with a scattergun older than either of us. Clary Finch brought nerve and a crow call he swore could fool a bird. Nettles said the law, and him would not ride, but the man would, and he set out a box of cartridges like communion. I deputized them with the only oath that counted. Do what you can. Don't do what you can't. Don't confuse the two. We laid the ground at first light. The dry arroyo that fed Cathedral's mouth ran like a knife scar two bends. A gravel bar, knee-high scrub for cover, if you believed in small mercies. I posted Wit and F in the shadow of a cut bank where hoof dust tells lies to men who don't know wind. Clary took the east lip with his crow call and a coil of rawhide, to yank across the draw if a horse tried to bolt through. Nettles, pale but steady, kept the remounts tucked in a seam of shade and practiced looking like a clerk who'd lost his pen instead of a man ready to hand up rifles. We scuffed tracks where none were and left none where they mattered. If numbers couldn't be grown, they could be suggested. Ada was already in the saddle when I stepped from the stable. She'd commandeered a bay with a soft mouth and a hard back, veil pinned inside her sleeve so it wouldn't telegraph. "You'll ride behind me," I said. "You'll speak when I tell you and not a word before." She frowned like a teacher, and then nodded like a soldier. The plain calico made her look smaller. The belt knife at her hip made the air around her larger. "He won't believe you'd bring me," she said. "He will believe I'd drag you to save my husband." "That's the play," I said. "Believe your line until he does." We made straight for the gulch while shadow still had length. I rode hatless and slow, the bent star printing a small bruise over my heart. Ada half a length back where Pike could see dread and hope wrestle in a face. Along the last mile I let our mounts scuff and stop, the way men ride when they've argued all the way there and run out of words. At the mouth I set my Winchester across my thigh and lifted my empty offhand to the sun. Heat already wavered over the chalk like a veil no wind dared touch. A crow barked twice from far off. Reins creaked like old timber. Pike showed himself as if he owned the horizon. 4 riders, same as last night, and a pack horse that moved like it remembered being ridden hard. Hart rode between them with his hands tucked. The rope still reed, true from where they watched. Pike slid from the saddle and smiled the way a man does when a bet has paid. "You brought the lady and the paper," he said. "You brought them late. I dislike late." His men laughed because he'd trained them too. I eased the oiled cloth free and let him have a clean look at the seal. He didn't take it. He let his men see it first. "You'll get this when I—" "Get him," I said, no sooner. I made the words big enough to reach his riders. "The clerk needs spouse and surveyor both present and speaking, or the paper's just doodles. You know that because the men who pay you know that." The smallest rider's mouth tightened at that Pike's crew didn't like to think about being an errand. Ada slid a breath forward. "Marten," she said, making his name into a favor. "Let me hear my husband say my name, and I'll tell the clerk where to put the lines. We're all thirsty. There's enough water to drown this town in arguments unless someone files right." She sounded tired and human and exactly like the kind of woman men always think will beg. He gestured Hart 2 steps closer, indulgent. Close was close enough. I watched his men instead of his eyes. The second from the left splayed boot, rawhide wrist thong stared at the seal like it could make him taller. The cook from last night picked his teeth and tried not to look scared. The one on the nick-shod horse shifted weight the way a mount reads a whip. I needed them thinking about paper, not edges. "Read it," Pike said, reaching. "Read it aloud," I countered. "So we all hear what we're dying for." His smile cracked a hair. "Men who live by bluff hate when you make them play cards face up." He held the paper to the light, mouth moving. While his eye chewed the lines, Hart's head dipped a half-inch. Prayer. The veil pin slid from Ada's sleeve to her palm like it had missed home. I saw the faintest twist of Hart's wrists. One more thread and he'd fly. Clary's reed gave one flat note from the east lip, a crow's scold that said wind. Now. I didn't turn my head. I raised the Winchester the width of a breath and said, as if it were an afterthought, "You'll." Like the part where the witness signs. That's where your men find out if you mean to share. A murmur went through Pike's riders like a snake deciding whether to strike itself. Greed is loud when it finally hears its name. I felt the day. "Tilt. Enough," Pike said, folding the paper slow. "Bring him." The rope fell from Hart's wrists in a single shrug. He didn't run. He stumbled like a man surprised by the size of the sky. Ada's hand dropped empty. I breathed once for the boy in the winter wagon, and once for whatever debt was left to pay. Then I said, "Now," to no one at all, and the arroyo woke like a throat clearing. The arroyo coughed dust and men. Witt's first shot cracked rock by a stirrup. F's second slapped a saddle tree, and Clary's rawhide whipped across the draw, so a bolting horse hit it and sat down hard. Sun flared white off the butte and turned shadows into traps. Hart's wrists came clear as air. The old twist at his ankles held just long enough for Ada to slide close and kiss it with the veil pin. The hemp whispered and quit. Pike had the decoy deed half folded. He paused, sniffed the wax, and smiled like he'd caught a card up my sleeve. "Clerk's grease smells like tallow," he said, soft. "This smells like stove." His Henry twitched toward Ada by instinct, which told me everything about the order his mind kept. I put a bullet into the sand at his boot and made it kick grit at his shin. "Hands easy," I said. His riders flinched in 3 different directions, one for bravado, one for prayer, one for the nick-shod horse. Witt stood up just enough to be a rumor of a man and racked his Winchester like a clock winding. F's. Scattergun wrote a warning across the open without hitting anything that bled. The cook from the night fire dropped his pistol as if it had turned to a hot coal. The smallest hand went for the seal on the paper, and not for his gun, which is how. Greed keeps a man alive by accident. Ada hauled Hart behind our horses by his collar, like she'd been married to him 100 years, and I saw the first real breath he'd taken since noon yesterday make his shoulders jump. Pike moved wrong once fast and pretty, and the pretty part almost fooled me. I shot the lever from under his Henry, so it clanged into the dust and rolled like a spooked hat. A real hat rolled to somebody's gray felt circling, then lying still rim up as if waiting for coins that wouldn't come. Clary's crow call scolded once. Nettles slid a rifle along the ground to Hart with the calm of a clerk passing a pen. No one fired to kill. We fired to peel. You could hear it in the rhythm scare, scatter, strip. The nickshod horse tore loose, hit Clary's line, and then chose sense over loyalty. Its rider kissed gravel, spat, and stayed down because he'd finally read the odds. Somewhere in the noise I felt the day tilt the rest of the way, the kind of tilt you only get when men decide they are tired of being the smaller version of themselves. Pike ended up on his knees because pride forgot how knees work when the ground quits agreeing with you. He laughed up at me like I was a joke he'd hoped I'd be. "Go on," he said almost kindly. "Heard you had a boy die on your watch. Make it even." Ada stood at my shoulder with the veil pin tucked back into her sleeve, and Hart breathing like a bellows behind her. The bent star bit my chest. I thought about the winter wagon, the long night inside it, the still boy, the prayer I didn't say because I was waiting on authority to arrive. I raised the Colt and put its front sight on the soft notch between Pike's eyes until the world narrowed to that single place where a choice sits. Wind carried a far thin note from town, maybe the bell shifting on its rope, maybe something in me striking metal. Either way, it rang. I holstered. "You don't get to make me into you," I said. "You get to stand up and walk where the law lives." I took Clary's rawhide and wrapped Pike's wrists, slow, neat, the way a man ties a load for a long road, and I pulled until he grunted, and not a hair more. F picked up the Henry's broken lever and dropped it in Pike's vest pocket, like a souvenir. Wit gathered the pistols and the paper, both fake and true, now sitting in the same world where men argue, but he handed the decoy to Ada, because she'd earned the right to throw it away or frame it as a keepsake of a lie that saved a life. Hart looked at me like a man who'd expected to be the cost and found himself the change. "You could have," he started. "I didn't," I said. "So you can file what you carried, and so he can be afraid for the first honest reason of his life." We walked Pike in with his wrists neat wrapped and his smile leaking away. No parade, just boots on planks and folks parting like we carried fever. Nettles met us at the depot door with his ledger open and his jaw set. He took Pike's pistols, logged their marks, and in a hand steadier than his breath wrote Marten Pike, where a man's name stops being a rumor. The freight room made a cell well enough. Cot, bucket, one high window that admitted light, but not forgiveness. Wit and F sat the door. Clary took the windowsill with his crow call still for once. Hart stood off to the side, working his jaw like a man tasting the after of rope. I felt the bent star under my shirt press a small thorn into my chest each time I breathed, like it wanted to say in the ending dot, by afternoon, the office smelled of paper and iron. Hart stood at the counter with what was left of his cravat stuffed into his pocket and read the oath like a sinner reading his first psalm. Ada said, "Wife and witness where the law requires," voice level as a scale. I slid the true deed from under Judges in Nettles's Bible. Wax softened. A seal bit. The docket mark settled into its corner like a brand cooling. Nettles thudded his stamp so hard the desk jumped. Outside, men from Ridge and Flatland read the posted notice with their hats in their hands, mouths set to argue, and then unsetting when the words didn't move. Cat's Eye went to record as town common, no man's puddle, everyone's well. The feud didn't die tidy, but the string it pulled on snapped. From now on water would be measured with a chain and a clerk's voice, not a lariat and a rifle dot by sunset. The platform held what passes for peace here, disputing without hands on iron. Hart thanked me with a grip that missed, and then found purchase like a colt learning reins. "We'll get stakes in the ground," he said, already turning toward the Badlands, as if they were numbers finally answering. Ada's thanks was smaller and cut cleaner. She pressed the stage ring back into my palm, warm from her skin. That was for the clerk, she said. Not for a vow he didn't earn. She looked past me to the ridge, to the work waiting. Do I still owe you? She asked. More than I can pay, I said, and less than you'd want. That got the first honest smile I'd seen on her. Then we're square enough to start clean. She slid the veil pin back into her sleeve, not like a keepsake but like a tool. When she and Hart walked off with cord and stakes, their backs made a pair of straight sentences pointed at the same period. Up on the skyline, a lone rider cut out of the dusk and went still, hat low, watching. He wasn't Pike. Some debts travel in other saddles. We loaded Pike on the north coach 2 hours before dawn. He talked all the way to the step syndicates. Back east, names he thought would make me blink. Letters, he said, would arrive like a tide. I let the words dust my boots and fall. You could have been me, he said soft, as if it were a kindness. No, I told him. I could have been the man who shot you and didn't. Remember that. The coach rattled toward a courtroom, where my part will be slower and smaller. After I cleaned my Colt, oiled the hinge, and put it away, the bent star went back in the drawer that sticks on damp days. It closed easier than I liked, as though it had practiced. I set Ada's ring beside it and shut the wood on both promise and authority, so I could hear myself think. Out on the platform, heat shivered over the tracks. The bell rope hung quiet, and I told myself the noon bell was done with me. Then a single note shook loose from the tower, one clean strike, when no hand touched the rope at all.